Every once in a while, a collection comes along that reminds us why we fell in love with toys in the first place. Not because they're expensive, not because they're rare, because every one of them has a story. Today we're stepping inside another incredible auction filled with vintage toy history. Let's uncover some interesting pieces, learn why collectors chase them, and maybe even discover a few hidden treasures that you never knew existed. Let's go. Today's video is sponsored by Hake's Auction House. Right now, they're featuring their July premiere auction. Bidding starts July 7th on some of the most impressive vintage items from Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and a lot more. Hake's is the best auction house in the galaxy because the best items are consigned on Hake's. Bidding ends July 29th, so go to hakes.com right now to follow the action and tell them the Padawan sent you. Thanks for Hake's for being a sponsor, and now back to the video. The hobby of collecting vintage toys has always been about more than just owning the toys. It's preserving pieces of childhood. Every figure, every playset, they represent a moment in time. Christmas mornings, trips to Toys R Us, the excitement of finding that one figure hanging on the peg that you have been searching for. Auctions like this allow us to revisit those moments. And some of these items haven't surfaced in years. Others may be the finest examples ever known, or the bargains that nobody wants except for you. And while only one person gets to become its caretaker, with auctions and videos like these, every collector gets a chance to experience these toys as pieces of vintage toy history. Starting off with our number 25 pick, the 1984 Series 1 Starscream made by Hasbro. The thing that people often forget is that the Transformers line wasn't invented in America, nor did it have the story of the Autobots versus the Decepticons. It actually started in Japan, made by a company called Takara. Now, the Diaclone line, made in 1980, focused on vehicles that transformed into robots, and in 1983, they would introduce the Microchange series that had everyday objects turning into robots. It wasn't until Hasbro came into the picture and they thought that the Diaclone and Microchange would make a great toy line. But first, they hired writers at Marvel Comics to create the lore that we know today. Before, they didn't have that. They were just toys. And this item right here is sealed and graded 80 by AFA, and it's the no rub sign variant. And the first 28 Transformer figures were made with no rub sign stickers. That wouldn't come until 1985. So that's one way to tell a Series 1 from a later made figure. Coming in at number 24, we are starting strong on this video. This is Snake Mountain, made in 1984 by Mattel for the Masters of the Universe line, and you can see this is the second release. And the reason why there's a second release was that in the early 80s, parent groups had a loud voice in the American Congress. And you can thank these groups for giving us the explicit lyric label that we find on albums, which for us kids, that label meant that the album was probably pretty cool. Well, it happened on this toy. The first iteration got a satanic panic because there was a microphone feature on this toy. Remember that? Well, the microphone feature was advertised as the scary spirit of Snake Mountain. Now, anything with skulls meant occult to this parent group, so they complained, and Hasbro quickly changed the advertising on the box now to read, "I am the voice of Snake Mountain." As you see here, stupid, but it got that group to calm down. And this item is sealed and graded by AFA at a 75+. At number 23, I think these items are just interesting. It's a 1983 AT-AT proof sheet for Return of the Jedi. And why I like these items is that they are more historical and really capture the essence of the creation of these toys before they went into production and before we can buy them. It gives you the knowledge of the steps that Kenner and Lucasfilm really had to go through in order to get from concept to design to marketing, and finally these landing on the toy shelves. And in this 1983 proof sheet is just one of the items in this auction that I think captures the spirit of toy collecting and why I love collecting items like these. It's just great history frozen in time and a piece that deserves to have its story told. At number 22, it's one of my favorite G.I. Joe characters and one of the best designed ones. It's the 1983 Series 2 Despero from Hasbro's G.I. Joe A Real American Hero line. Now, G.I. Joe is a story of rebirth. And if you want to watch my video for the full history of G.I. Joe, I'll leave a link in the description of this video, and I'll leave a link somewhere on the screen. But Destro in particular is an interesting character. We all thought that Destro was just Cobra Commander's minion, like a second in command. But what made Destro cool was that he was a self-made man. Destro was a weapons dealer, and a very good one. He was so rich that he didn't really need Cobra Commander, which is why they never really trusted each other, which is what made that dynamic so cool, and Destro one of my favorite villains. This figure is sealed and has a very high grade of 85 by AFA. At number 21, it's a 1977 engineering prototype of the Princess Leia action figure. So, before the figures went into production, they needed to know if these things would handle being mass produced. Sometimes they fell apart, sometimes they would rub and cause the paint to change into a different color, things like that. So these engineering prototypes were made to really give the quality control arm of Kenner its final check before it was sent off to the big factories to get mass produced. And they would often have quality control codes handwritten on the feet, which this one has. This one is graded 85 by AFA. Just a nice piece of vintage toy history. Another Transformer pops in this list at number 20. It's the Series 3 Galvatron, made in 1986 by Hasbro. Now, by 1986, Transformers, they were a household name. This was because they were everywhere. Kids saw them in toy shops. There was a cartoon that they could watch after school. It was in the food aisles, in the comic book section. It was basically no holds barred. And this was because of the deregulation in children's television and advertising to kids, something that the Ronald Reagan administration really fought for. Ronald Reagan was the president during the early 80s. But this is why we got so many cool toy lines and cartoons in the 80s, was because of this deregulation. And this piece right here is actually the more rare Canadian release of Galvatron. It's sealed and graded 85 by AFA. The one thing I love about vintage Star Wars toys, well, one of the many things that I like, is seeing how they released in other countries. And at number 19, we have the Italian release of Darth Vader, made by Harbert Toys in 1978. So General Mills owned Kenner in 1977. General Mills was a big food conglomerate. And when Lucasfilm approached Kenner, George Lucas wanted to be sure that Kenner could get worldwide distribution for the toys. And the only way that Kenner could make that happen is by General Mills and their wide global reach and having the ability to make licensee deals with other toy companies. And Harbert was one of these international toy companies. So that's why we got so many great international releases, and I love seeing these preserved like this. And this example is graded 80 by AFA. I've said it before, you can basically invest in three things that will never lose value. You can invest in gold, you can buy Apple stock, and then you can invest in vintage sealed Boba Fett toys. That's the truth. At number 18, we have a 1982 Boba Fett in his Empire Strikes Back packaging. Now this one is cool because we also see that it's one of the card backs that has a Revenge of the Jedi advertising on it for the Admiral Akbar Melloway figure. And for those who may not know, Return of the Jedi was first titled Revenge of the Jedi. And as you can see, materials went out to the public with that name, but at the last minute, Lucasfilm changed it. This is because, well, revenge is not the Jedi way. But in 2005, we would get Revenge of the Sith because, heck yeah, revenge, that's what Sith are all about. And this item we see right here is graded 85 by AFA. One of the best-selling toy lines in the 60s and 70s was the original 12-inch G.I. Joe action figures, but when Star Wars came out and the smaller 3.75-inch figures became so popular, well, that pretty much sealed the fate for 12-inch figures, but there was still a market for those. So Star Wars wanted to cash in on all of it. The only thing is that the 12-inch figures, the Star Wars figures, they didn't do so well. In fact, only 12 action figures were made. But what we see here is the very hard to find Mexican Lily Letty version. This one is graded 40Q. And the Q grade means that the box has been opened, but the contents inside, they aren't disturbed. Now, here is another figure that tells part of the story on how Kenner figures were made and the process from concept to toy shelf. At number 16, it's a 1983 reuse sales example. These sales examples were often used at toy sales, at toy meetings, at small toy shows to show the large and small chain stores and distribution partners what the new toys will look like and what the new toy companies had to offer. And as you see here, often they were miscarded, but they were still great examples. Early renditions, and these are super rare to find. This example is graded 80 by AFA. Before millions of Darth Vader figures were made, there were only a handful like this, built by Kenner's engineers to figure out how to bring one of cinema's greatest villains to life in plastic. This isn't the toy you bought in stores. It's the toy that made the toy you bought in stores possible. At number 15, it's a prototype Darth Vader with the double telescoping lightsaber. That lightsaber had a small filament which extended out from the main saber, but Kenner quickly discontinued that in late 1978, which makes these rare. And that this is a prototype of that makes this rare on rare on rare. And toy historians and hardcore collectors know the significance of toys like these. And it's toys like this that tell a real story in the progression of how these toys came to market. Just an exciting piece to see. And even though it's graded at a low 40 by AFA, the fact that these are so rare, this is the highest graded example known to exist of these. And here's an item that may not be on this list at all. It didn't make the top 25, but I wanted to point out just because of its controversy in toy collecting, and it's also available in this auction. It's the Savage He-Man, known to collectors as the Wonder Bread He-Man. This is one of the greatest myths in toy collecting. Despite its nickname as the Wonder Bread He-Man, it was never actually a Wonder Bread promotion. Instead, it was a rare regional mail-in figure from 1982, and the stores included stores in Michigan, in Kentucky, mostly on the East Coast. And today, authentic examples are considered one of the holy grails of the Masters of the Universe collecting line. And because these are often paired with fake accessories or the wrong accessories, finding graded examples is usually the way to go if you want to add this item into your collection. And here we have an AFA 80 graded example. So back to our main list, and coming in at number 14, it's the Fantastic Four #1, released in 1961 by Marvel Comics. So before the X-Men, which was my favorite comic book as a kid, before the Avengers, there was the Fantastic Four. And that's what makes this comic so special, is it's the series that paved the way for superhero teams. This is the original Stan Lee story with the Jack Kirby cover art, and it's graded 3.5 by CGC. This toy was on the list for the top toys of the 1980s, voted on by you, the viewer. So be sure to check that video out to see where the Falcon landed and to see what other toys made that list. And I'll put that link in the description, and I'll also put a link right here in one of these corners. But at lucky number 13, it's the 1979 Millennium Falcon made by Kenner. And you can argue that it's a playset, because it pretty much is, and it's because of how many features this thing has. You can open the top and it's just full of areas like the rotating turret gun, the ramp to get in, the Jedi training area, smuggling compartments, desert table, cockpit, just so much playability in this one. It was also released on the Empire Strikes Back packaging and Return of the Jedi packaging, but this is the original 1979 packaging and the version that's the most sought after by collectors. It's graded 80+ by AFA. At number 12, it's the first released double telescoping figure of Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi. And if you were to have a list of the most rare Star Wars action figures that were released to the public, I'm not talking about prototypes or not talking about anything like that, this figure would be in the top 5. It's just hard to find these because of how fragile the double telescoping lightsaber is. And if you do happen to find one of these, they will not be in the best of shape. Often they'll be broken, but this one is in great shape and it's graded 80 by AFA. Next on the list, yep, it's another Boba Fett. And this one is one that I think is harder to find on card these days. At number 11, it's the Droids Boba Fett, released by Kenner in 1985. There was a Saturday morning cartoon based on the adventures of R2-D2 and C-3PO called Droids. It only ran one season and only 12 action figures were made. Well, really only 8 original figures were made. This Boba Fett, it's just his 1979 figure repackaged into the Droids card art with a collector coin, but it's a favorite among collectors today. And this one is the highest graded example known to exist, with only 5 others having this same grade at an AFA 90. And now let's get into the top 10, and I thought the first 15 were pretty cool. These next 10, I think we're getting into the upper echelon of collecting. At number 10, it's a vinyl Cape Jawa. I know I've said before why these are so rare and why they aren't just any other toy. So for those of you who are new to this channel, the vinyl Cape Jawa was first released by Kenner in the spring of 1978, and it came with the vinyl cape, as we see right here. But about the time of the holiday shopping season, around the fall of 1978, Kenner updated the Jawa to have a cloth cape, ending the production cycle of the vinyl cape version, which makes these hard to find loose and almost impossible to find them on card, which is what we have here. And we have a great example up for auction, and it's graded at a very, very high 85. Coming in at number 9, we talked about the 1985 Droids line earlier with Boba Fett. This is the 1985 Droids prototype of Jessica Meade, who was a character in the Droids cartoon. And with only 12 figures made, and Jessica not one of them in the first wave, there was going to be a second wave made, with Jessica included. But with the cartoon being canceled after only one season, you can actually watch it right now on Disney+, it only made sense to cancel the toy line, but not before this first shot was made. And this is graded 80+ by AFA. When Star Wars came out in 1977, there were a few countries that didn't allow Star Wars to be shown. Now, most of these reasons were political, like in communist countries. And in these banned countries, both the movies and the toys weren't allowed. And where tons and tons of bootleg Star Wars products started to surface. But in Turkey, it's kind of funny because both the movie and the toys were not banned. But we got the most famous bootleg toy line of Star Wars ever produced. I'm talking about the Turkish Uze toy line made in 1988, with this version here called Blue Stars probably being its most famous figure, like its poster child. These figures were just modified versions of the Kenner figures and often had pretty comical card art, which I think is what makes them so appealing. And it's super rare to find these on card and in good shape, and this example is graded 50 with no examples known to be graded higher, and these hardly go up for auction, so I'm expecting some bidding warfare on this one. Something that I know nothing about, but I've always wanted to learn to play Magic the Gathering. And at number 7, we have an uncut 1993 collector's edition artist proof. And it's expected to sell anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. This is a world that I basically know nothing about, but I would love to see how much this actually sells for, and I would love to learn how to play one day. And if any of you see me at a convention, take me aside and say, Padawan, come over here, I'm gonna teach you how to play Magic the Gathering. I would actually love that. I just thought that this item was super interesting, and it kind of shows you the diversity of this auction. At number 6, if you were a Thundercats fan back in the 80s, this was probably your grail. It's the 1986 Cat's Lair, and this toy just shows you how toy engineers had to outdo each other on the playset run. I mean, it's pretty much toy engineers just flexing their game and saying, oh yeah, look what I made. It's basically what it is. This Canadian example is the highest grade known to exist at an 85 by AFA. Now, in this Hake's auction, there are a ton of carded figures here. Too many to call out. I just wanted to point it out that there's a lot from every release of Star Wars, Superpowers, Star Trek, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Masters of the Universe, Ninja Turtles, Thundercats, and some with some great prototypes. There's wrestling figures and a ton of original comic art and a lot of vintage comic books. So really a lot of nice variety in this auction. And they also have this, which I think may go for, a steal of a price. It's not on my main list, but from Kenner in 1977, it's the early bird certificate package. Now, if you don't know what this is, when Lucasfilm was looking for a toy company to make the Star Wars toys, pretty much every toy line said no to George Lucas. Companies like Mattel, Mego, Hasbro, they all said no. Like the most respected toy lines in the history of toy making. This was because action figures and toys from science fiction movies, or pretty much any movie of that era, it was a real financial gamble. Millions of dollars were at stake if that movie was a dud, and most science fiction movies of that day, they were duds. Except for titles like Planet of the Apes and Star Trek, pretty much sci-fi movies just came and went. But eventually Lucasfilm found a small toy company called Kenner, and Kenner took a chance on the Star Wars line of toys. But by the time both Kenner and Lucasfilm agreed to a contract for the toy license, it was April of 1977. Star Wars would release a month later, in May of 1977. So there was no chance that Kenner would be able to make the action figures and toys in time. So while Kenner was in the designs and the early production phase in the summer of 1977, the marketing department over at Kenner had a great idea, and that idea was the Early Bird Certificate program, launched in time for the Christmas holiday season in late 1977. Parents would basically buy the certificate package at the store. They would bring it home for little Tommy and Becky to open. The kids would fill out that certificate, send it in the mail, and in the early spring of 1978, they would get the action figures. Well, this is a sealed version of that certificate package, and you hardly ever see these sealed because they were meant to be opened, duh. And this is graded 75 by AFA, and what I consider to be the godfather of the modern toy movement. Now let's get back to our main list and into the top 5. And at number 5, it's Anakin Skywalker from his Power of the Force release in 1985 by Kenner. So there's a weird dichotomy with this figure. For the Anakin loose figure, you can pretty much buy him for 30 bucks, sometimes less. Doesn't even have an accessory. And this was because Anakin, the figure, was offered as a mail-away in 1984 with millions and millions of these figures made and sent out. But the Power of the Force version on the card back, it's both the coin and the fact that this card back was never released in a wide distribution. That is what makes it so rare. The coin alone can go from $300 to $1,000 depending on how good a shape it's in. And today, sealed examples of Anakin in great condition are almost impossible to find. This one is graded at a very high 85 by AFA. And at number 4, we have the 1986 Eternia playset made by Mattel for the Masters of the Universe toy line. This was one of the biggest playsets made in the 1980s, with only the G.I. Joe USS Flag and the G.I. Joe Defiant playsets being anywhere close to being considered gargantuan playsets. Now, in 1986, this Eternia playset had a huge price tag, which meant that not a lot of these were sold. And if you go try to find one of these in the wild today, they are often in an open box version with parts missing, parts broken, or both. So to find an example sealed and in great shape is super rare. And here we have a version graded at an AFA 80. I really do think comic books are one of the best examples of American literature to have influenced so many pop culture genres around the world. I mean, even George Lucas is dedicating an entire museum to this mantra. So at number 3, we have All American Comics number 61, made by DC in 1944, and it's the first appearance of Solomon Grundy, who was a Green Lantern villain. This example is graded 7.0 by CGC. Remember when we used to go into Toys R Us or KB, and even before you entered the store or your favorite toy aisle, there were these awesome displays that were so colorful and presented the toys in a way that you just wanted to take them all home. Well, at number 2 is one of those displays from our childhood. It's the 1980 Empire Strikes Back Collect All 32 Ceiling Hanger Store display. Now, once a sale was over, these got tossed into the garbage dump right away. But some kids asked for these to take home. I would have been one of those kids. And some employees also took them home. There was also ones that the marketing departments never distributed. Those remained in pristine condition. And I think just like the toys themselves, this just adds to the complete story of these toys and how we saw them inside the stores. Just an amazing piece of toy history right here, and this one is graded at a very high 90, with only 3 other examples known to have been graded the same, and this one is expected to sell anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, and I am definitely gonna keep tabs on what this goes for. And at number 1, I think this one might just set a record. This is a first release Ben Kenobi on his Star Wars 12 ABAC. And this has the double telescoping feature. And along with the Darth Vader version of these action figures, this is the most rare Star Wars action figure in existence. To find this carded, to find it sealed, and to find it in great shape is rare upon rare upon rare. And if you were to find this in the wild, I mean, not belonging to a collector, like in an estate sale from someone's attic or in a box of old toys that someone's grandmother forgot to wrap one Christmas, well, you have a better chance to get hit by lightning or to win the lottery than to find one of these. Maybe that's a tiny exaggeration. It's just hard to find these. And this one is graded 85 by AFA, and this is expected to sell anywhere between $75,000 and $125,000. That, my friends, is mega collectorland territory. But I would like to know, if you were to get any one item from this auction, what would it be? Which one would you choose and why? What's the story that you think that toy told you? Let all of us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the stories behind these toys, share this video with somebody who you think would like it and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. As always, my friends, thank you, and I will see you next time.